Everyone's saying AI is the end of consulting, the end of coding, the end of expertise. My guest today is Tom Stockton from Fuzzy Labs, and he's still employed, still hiring, still building. What does he know that the doom merchants don't know? Well, at least three things. AI didn't kill consulting, but it did make hard problems even harder, and therefore expertise more valuable. Secondly, AI doesn't exactly forget things, but the context rots. The tools that you think are ready, they are not quite ready. And finally, if we stop teaching people to code, we end up with AI governing everything. And to use Tom's words and not mine, then we are all screwed. Enjoy this week's interview of the week. Tom, I'm going to go straight to the heart of the matter, and I'm certain that all of our listeners are very interested in this. Is your work and Fuzzy Labs' work into open source more or less valuable now that Claude code exists?
So I don't know if that's the right question, actually, Jamie. I think the value of the work hasn't changed. I think the value of open source is what it is, regardless of the existence of proprietary models and proprietary services. And if you zoom out, I would say, the existence of generative AI and what that's turning into in terms of agents has created more opportunity for us as a business. Some people want proprietary services. That's great, and we use them as well. But there's a lot of use case for building your own open source stack, using open source models, open weight models, and there's opportunity for that as well. So I think overall it's just creating more opportunity in the industry.
It sounds to me like you are alive and kicking. So is that true? So are you doing well as a consultancy, or are all the doom mongers out there who are saying it's the end of the world of work as we know it and consultancy is dead because we no longer need people? It sounds like you're not observing that at all.
No, not at all. The company's growing rapidly, and I think you look at the news yesterday or the day before, both OpenAI and Anthropic have just launched their own professional service business joint ventures. I don't know if you've seen the news. Billions of dollars they've done with PE firms because they need people to do the AI integration so that they can do more of the knowledge work that AI can do. So there's a lot of work for consultancies and professional service businesses to work with the human beings that need to use the systems, but also it's like those thorny integrations with legacy systems and data. There's a lot of work there that still needs the people to do.
Are these tools the new cloud native? A bunch of technologies that now require a lot of hand-holding to get them to work in production?
I would say the barrier to entry is lower than previously. You don't need necessarily to be a great developer, a great coder to get value out of AI and agents. I'm a very average coder. I've not been on the tools for years, but I've been able to build my own agent that's been very effective, and I'm sure we can talk about this shortly and compare and contrast our experience. That's giving me real value, and and this is now going across the company. Now we had our company-wide AI agent hackathon last Friday. Everybody's built agents across the business. We're now looking to consolidate those and get value more broadly.
Fantastic. We are going to come to code in a second, but I want to just do a bit of a left turn. I think you're a great leader, Tom. You've got one of those characteristics of leadership is that you're enthusiastic and you believe in what you're doing. Now, a very simple WhatsApp exchange between you and I about 5 weeks ago was enough to send me down the Claude co-work rabbit hole. And that's because based on what they said and what you said, I thought, this is going to be life-changing. Now, if you've been paying attention to my LinkedIn stream, I have had mountainous frustrations. I feel I've been gaslighted. I feel I've been misled by this tool. And if it was an employee, I would fucking fire them, point blank, for toxic and unreliable behaviour. Now, of course, I'm sat here thinking, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I'm desperate to know, and I think our listeners are desperate to know, what is your experience with co-work, and have you had any of the frustrations I've had, or am I just basically some sort of old man who doesn't know how to program the VCR?
Yes, I would say the latter. And I'm curious. It's like I was thinking. I've read your posts, and you've got a lot of interactions with that latest post. Around
55,000 views and counting. So people seem to relate. Most people are like, "Yeah, I hate it," and then about 10% of the people are more like you, say, "Mate, you're doing it wrong."
Yeah, and I was before this. I was scanning through the post, and I actually got Claude to create me a brief. I got my agent to give me a brief for this call, and I got it to
Yeah.
research your post and look at your Substack and all that kind of stuff. It was a really nice piece put together. Sort of helped me consolidate the thoughts. And somebody in there linked to a repo of a guy, Gary Tan GStack, which is this guy's CEO repository of agents. So I think it is a bit polarized at the moment. There's definitely, if you don't use it in the right way, you are going to get a suboptimal experience, which I think is what you're getting. But I think if you constrain it in the right way, if you give it quite prescriptive ways of working to the right context and the right tools, then it is very efficient. It's not perfect. It still will make mistakes, but the nice thing about it is you can tell it about its mistakes in a very engineering fashion. It will go, I understand, yes, this was the exception that caused that, and then it'll go and fix it for you. So you can interact with it in a very human way.
Well, one of the frustrations I had is it seemed to forget the day. And Ian, who's my partner in crime on this podcast, earlier, before you joined, Tom, had said, you need to be more explicit. You need to say, hey, before you answer the question, check the date. Is he right? Do I need to be that explicit with the thing?
I think it depends on the use case, and maybe depends on the model as well. Give me some more example. What was the date problem you had?
Well, essentially, just before Easter. So what I'm trying to do, Tom, just for clarity, is get it to work as a research assistant, which is a very time-consuming part of my work, and as a personal assistant. I've got a scrap of paper. It's a hack of getting things done. And as an ex-CEO speaking to a much cooler present CEO, your personal productivity is key. But my personal productivity is very mechanical. I do these tasks, I link them to my monthly goals, I link them to my yearly goals. And so I've tried to train it on the Jamie method of productivity. Just before I went away for Easter, I did some reflection. I always write letters to myself and I go over them, what was working, what was not working. I did that with Claude. I felt a bit naked because this is very personal and intimate. And I said, anyway, listen, I've got these things, they're open. I'm going to dump them on you. That usually goes in my tickler file. That's part of my planning. I said, remember them. But I've got to get off for Easter now. It said, Happy Easter. So I came back this week to that chat and said, hey, just dump that Perceptron essay back on me that we hacked before. It dumped it and said, have a great break. And I didn't say anything. I thought, I'm not going to say anything. And then I said, oh, just do me a favour. We've integrated with Ahrefs now. What would be a decent title for this? Gave me the title. They said, have a great Easter. And I was thinking, doesn't it fucking know that Easter has been and gone? And in the same project, I've been working with Claude. So it must know that I'm back. And it keeps saying to me, have a great break. And I don't know how long I can stay in that chat and keep making it say, have a nice break. And Ian said, oh, you're just being weird. Just tell it it's made a mistake and it won't do it again.
I think you might be suffering there from what's sometimes known as context rot. So if you've got a lot of context in that existing chat of stuff that was useful but is no longer useful anymore, it can definitely cause the model to hallucinate and give you suboptimal results. So there's quite a good technique I've learned recently is that once you've completed a task, you explicitly clear the context, and you can do this in Claude Code with the /clear command,
Right.
and then you start afresh. And that tends to mitigate a lot of those problems.
I've learned something there, Tom. Context rot. I was concerned that what I've loaded into the file system is everything I've ever written. Clippings, photocopies, poems. It's a lot of stuff. And I can remember it because it came out of me. I've got a vague idea where it all is in my system. So context rot, I'd not heard that term. Ian, had you heard that term before?
Yeah. So there's also a little bit of fuzziness around how much context these LLMs actually store. So they sometimes say they've got 100,000 words of context or whatever, but actually what they're doing is they're taking the previous context and then summarizing it for itself, or summarizing the first part of the call. First part of the chat, and then the last part of the chat, and then squeezing the middle into a thing. So you get these weird situations where, like Tom says, things seem to degrade before your eyes.
I think for me that leads on to sort of more the harness of the thing. And I think I personally, I don't use Cowork, I use Claude Code, because to me, there's Cowork is an abstraction on top of code. Right. Which is a bit fuzzy. I want to be a bit more explicit in how it works. So Claude Code, I think, gives you a bit more of an explicit interface. It's a bit more techy. You've got to know the terminal, but it feels more powerful, it feels more accurate to me.
Okay, we're going to come to Claude Code any second now, but just to wrap this section up, Tom, you have found Claude useful for your planning and in your role as a manager. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not suffering from the cognitive overload that I've suffered, but it's actually taking stuff off your plate rather than putting it onto your plate?
Yeah, it's been a big cognitive reducer for me. You know how it is when you run a business. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff you're trying to keep track of. You don't want to forget. You want to make sure you're doing a good job. The way I've got this agent set up now is it keeps track of all of this stuff for me. It checks my email, it checks my calendar, it checks all our internal messaging, checks my task list, gives me a daily briefing. I don't need to worry about remembering that stuff. I can check that briefing every day. I did take a couple of days to be confident with it. I'm checking the output, I'm making sure it's doing the right things, and there were a few little tweaks I've made. And it's probably not perfect. There's a few things that might get filtered slightly wrongly, but it's better than I was doing it. And I can compound, the improvements I make are compounded. Once I've made that improvement, it's written in the procedure, it's written in the spec, and I get it from then on.
Brilliant. Okay, let's switch gears to code, Tom. It seems to me, reading between the lines, no, not just reading between the lines, but speaking to the team at Container Solutions, that Claude Code really is a needle-moving use case. Can you tell us about your experiences with Claude Code? What does it do for productivity? And also tell us about your customers' experience, because obviously you're on the cutting edge. You really know what you're doing. But out there in the real world, are we seeing similar productivity gains?
I think it's definitely early days. I'm probably on closer to the edge of what people are doing in terms of adoption, or probably one of many people that are trying it. And unless I've become obsessed with making sure I was going to do this. You and I spoke, whatever it was, 6 weeks ago, and I said I'm going to figure this out. I was at the early stages of it, and I have made a lot of progress on that. But the state of the art and the optimal ways of doing this are changing all the time. I imagine in 6 months, the way I build this agent now will be completely different. I'm interested to try OpenClaw, for example. It's a bit of a scary thing to go into, but it's a really interesting piece of software. What was the question again?
The question was, you're on the cutting edge. I think what we're trying to work out, or what we're discussing, Claude Code specifically, seems to be moving the needle. Now, there are a lot of people out there saying it's rubbish, and they're claiming that it's as crap at code as it is at planning my schedule. Yeah. Is that true in your opinion? And I think we're curious, what are your customers seeing? Because obviously your customers have got real challenges. They're running in production. They've got real customers. They don't want to end up on the front page of the Financial Times. So is Claude Code moving the needle, not just for you as a company, as Fuzzy Labs, but is it moving the needle for your customers?
Yeah, so I've two separate questions though. I think for me, definitely it's moving the needle, and we can go into the implementation detail a little bit if you're interested in that. In terms of customers, the customers we work with, we're building bespoke solutions, typically with open source. So for me, the way I'm using Claude Code at the moment, it's a sort of an individual productivity level for individual tasks within the business. I'm not launching this as a service that anybody can use. I'm not at that stage with it at the moment. There is an interesting thought about how we would distribute, and I'm looking at this at the moment, how do you distribute those skills and capabilities across more broadly? And Anthropic have got this plugin architecture where you can load in existing agentic plugins or sets of skills that do certain things. Interestingly, Anthropic launched one for financial services this week, which came after their announcement that they were going to do professional services. So you can see where they're going with this. Financial services set of agents that you can just download and install, but it still needs a human to configure it and integrate it with their specific systems. But they've got this packaged set of skills. So in terms of what our customers are doing right now, they're not using Claude Code directly. Our customers are, some of them are very technically literate. Some of them were building AI systems for that. They don't have any technical background. So more bespoke systems for them there that they can use more broadly across the organization, more enterprise level stuff, I would say, than the sort of personal assistant level.
What is your take on this argument? It's raging out there, Tom. It's the end of coding as we know it on one end of the spectrum, Claude Code's absolutely rubbish. It can never do the job of a creative, dedicated professional. Are you even in that argument, or are you just like, whatever, it's all clickbait and I don't care?
No, there's definitely some good debate to have around it. I mean, we know it's a great coder. We know it can write great code with the right constraints and the right management, with the right framework. But you still need human beings to be reviewing the output of it. And you still need human beings that know what good engineering looks like to give it the commanding and issue the task in the first place. So it can't be the end of coding. I don't think it can be the end of coding, because if nobody learns to code, then what happens in the future when we've got no engineers that know how to code? We're left with AI governing AI, and then we're all screwed. So that can't be the case. In terms of other creative things, though, I don't know what your experiences is, but AI generated copy is a bag of shit. And
oh mate, don't get me started.
I've tried. I've built my own like Tom's tone of voice file, and it's analysed all my previous emails and all my Slacks and everything like that. It was the file it came out with was brilliant. I was like, yeah, that's how I speak.
Yeah.
Now draft me some emails. One of my agent's tasks, if it thinks it can draft an email, I sent you a screenshot the other day. This is the draft that Claude sent back to you when you invited me to do this. But it's not right. I wouldn't send that copy.
I couldn't help it. I've obviously I've loaded all my work into it. And I said, do you understand my tone of voice? It understands it completely. And I said, just write me a quick LinkedIn post. And it says the most awful shit. And it's mainly because it's trained on content marketing content from out there. And it goes, do you think Samuel Morse invented the telegraph? Wrong. And I'm like, I don't talk like that. I don't even remotely sound like that. I use long sentences. I use commas. I don't do short sentences. That's a defect in the way I write. And it doesn't seem to know that. And it's just cringeworthy. And it can't do design either. I tried to get it to do some design. That was pretty hilarious.
What kind of design?
I got it to design a postcard for social media. I said, just, please, you've seen the book cover. And it changed the title from Visionaries, Rebels and Machines to Pioneers, Radicals and Mavericks. And then the cyborg's head, it's behind me. For those people watching on the video, you can see the cyborg's head on the poster behind me somewhere. Now, obviously, the public data on heads like that comes from old statues. So the cyborg came out looking like a statue of Zeus or a Roman god, because that's all available on Wikipedia. It was awful. It looked like a child had done it. And so I was like, whoa. But at the same time, Tom, I can tell you a remarkable use case. And once again, I can thank you for the great tip you gave me, which is Claude can be a good coach. So I really don't know anything about SEO, but I got a subscription to Ahrefs. The user interface is awful. I literally cannot navigate that. But I say to Claude, go speak to Ahrefs. Give me a title for this thing, or give me some keywords, or what have I missed? And it integrates, and then it says, do you want me to upload a keyword list to the Container Solutions like a competitive analysis page? And I'm like, yeah, do that. I could not do that with Ahrefs, but through Claude, I can. So that, being completely honest, is a fantastic use case.
Yeah, I think it's a great researcher. It's a great performance analysis. It's a great organizer. Is it a great creative? No. But could it be? I'm not discounting that people can do this well. I don't doubt that it will improve and improve. But should we hand over our creativity to AI? No, I don't believe we should. Otherwise, what do we become as human beings?
I can speak to this a little bit. I'm writing a book at the moment, Follow the Money by O'Reilly, if anyone wants to look it up. And I started by using Copilot in Vim. So I used Vim to write.
Cool.
And I used Copilot, and it had the autocomplete. And initially I was like, this is great. It's sort of encapsulating what I want to say and really quickly, and I just change a few words here and there, and it's wonderful. And then I realized halfway through the first chapter that it was turning my prose into a very mushy, anodyne, dull kind of text. And so I just switched it off, and I haven't used it since. What I do use it for is sort of summarizing bits and suggesting which ways to go. But it's definitely not producing copy that's good for me, and it's not helping me in the writing process itself.
So I've got this idea. I thought this idea would go viral. It just shows what I know about anything. Now, I can see over your right shoulder there's a beautiful brick building, Tom, in Manchester. when you create an arch, whether it's on a viaduct, and I know there's plenty of them round where you are, you use something called false work. So imagine a wooden scaffolding, the shape of the bridge. You put that into the structure, build the arch over it, and when the arch is self-sustaining, you take the false work out and then you throw it away. So it's a little bit like the false work remains in the structure, but it's gone, lost to time. If LLMs are trained on the false work we produce, great copy, great content, and it cannot create something original, then I think the job of humans will be to continue to build fantastic false work so that the LLMs can improve. I think that will be our role. Can an LLM produce music?
That's the interesting point. There's been, I don't know if you've seen, we might go off on a tangent here, but there's been a bit of a YouTube sensation, this band called Angine de Poitrine.
Love them. Yeah.
Unbelievable, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's amazing. It's Frank Zappa and Primus had a baby.
Is it an AI?
It can't. No, it's not AI. This is the whole point of it. It's so off the wall, and people are saying it's
Right.
like this is the antithesis of AI. AI could never do this,
Right.
because these guys have done something which is so mental but incredible that you can't. It's like, come and get this AI. The YouTube comments are as good as the video itself.
So I am doing this. I'm cringing. I'm almost blushing. For those who watch it on YouTube, I've got even redder than I usually look. I am trying to procure a Substack blog with a single narrator podcast accompanying it that I write using screenwriting techniques. Nobody watches my single narrator podcasts, but I'm desperate. I want to produce human copy. I want to give back to the human race. And every week I'm like, what am I doing? I don't want to do this anymore. But I'm like, you've got to stick with it because we have to fight the machines. You have to do something the machine wouldn't do, and hence this single narrator podcast with funny voices. So I'm going to persevere. That's my equivalent of that mad French band you're describing, Tom.
Yeah, I read those people who commented on this, but somebody compared it back to when photography first came about. Have you read this, Ian?
Yeah.
And they said realism painters were also like, well, what's the point of us? Because you can just take photos. But then they came out with more abstract forms of art, like cubism and all these other things. And they're saying that's the Angine de Poitrine reaction to generic AI-generated music.
We have a need for novelty and originality. That's something we crave and something we're entertained by. And if you have a lot of anodyne music that sounds the same, and AI is only going to reinforce that trend, people are going to respond to something that surprises them a bit. I mean, jazz is all about surprises, isn't it? And people like that. So I think
wankers like jazz.
But the musicians often like jazz because they get tired of hearing the same patterns, and they want to hear something new. And if you're not in that world, you can't understand it. I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of jazz, but I am a fan of Angine de Poitrine. You could argue that's some form of jazz. So I think it's exactly that analogy of if we can take lots of photographs, then photographs become ordinary and not interesting. And who cares if you see another sunset in a picture? Who cares? But if you see something, abstract and that surprises you and shocks you, but actually makes sense on some level, that is interesting.
Right. Now, Tom, we're coming to the end of your section in the studio with us today. But before we let you escape back to Manchester, how can our customers how can our listeners find out about more what you're doing? Because we know that you've got this wicked open source cookbook that's very popular. How can they find out more about Fuzzy Labs? Oh, you've got it in your hand. And what are your parting words to anybody who is sort of dipping the toe in ML ops, which is of course your speciality?
Yeah, so we are professional service business, same as Container Solutions. We sell our service based on credibility of doing what we do, which is why we made this cookbook, which explains what we do, has case studies of what customers we've done it with, but it's also got open source examples of how to do different machine learning from research through to production, but using ML ops in a well-engineered way. And all the code is open source, using open source tools as we would like it. If you'd like a copy, you can go on our website, fuzzylabs.ai, and there's a link on there to go and download it.
And Tom, is it true you run a pretty wicked meetup up in Manchester that attracts people not just from Manchester but from right across the country?
It's been quite popular, yeah. We get like 100 people. We sell out now. We get 100 people turn up. We've got one in 2 weeks, which is around agentic security, which is a really hot topic at the moment. Obviously, we're all very excited to build these agents, but are they safe? You know, and there's a nice paradigm about agents being useful or secure, and can they be both? So we've got a really good panel. We had a dry run yesterday here. It's going to be great in a couple of weeks.
Fantastic. We're going to share the links in our comments on YouTube and on the podcast platforms. And obviously, if you ever want a use case from an old man who shouts at generative AI, I'm your man. So just let me know and I'll jump on a train to Manchester and I can tell all of your wonderful young friends and people who tell their thoughts about how I completely fucked up my interactions with Claude co-work.
We'll get you there, Jamie.
Thanks ever so much for coming in, Tom. Have a great weekend. It's coming up soon and we look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me. Cheers, Jamie. Thanks, Ian.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching Container Solutions TV. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube and follow Container Solutions on LinkedIn for cut down parts and weekly clips. If you want help with platform engineering, cloud native transformation, or you need to follow the money in order to change how you operate your cloud at scale, then visit our website using the links below and get in touch. We'll see you in the next episode.